First and foremost, I'd like to inform everyone in the room that I'm having problems thanks to allergies hearing very well today, so I would ask that you speak up, not only for my benefit, but for the benefit of the other members on the board. If we could start with a roll call, please.
Bill Rowson,
Here.
Jake Wise,
Here.
Jack Davis, Christy Marco,
Here.
Kathy Maston,
Here.
Jan Mendel,
Here.
Claire Mullen,
Here.
David Powell,
Here.
Youth on Board Ethan Brown,
Here.
Youth on Board Sadie Van Riper.
All right, before we move on to approval of the minutes, I'd like to take just a moment to have our new member of the board introduce herself and give us a little information.
Sure. My name's Claire Mullen. I'm the Director of Mobility Management for OCCK Transportation here in Salina.
All right.
Welcome.
Everybody on the board like to introduce yourself very quickly to her?
I'm Kathy Maston. I'm from Independent Connection.
I'm Jan Mendel. I'm retired. I used to work for OCCK.
Bill
Lots of
Rowson,
years.
retired broadcaster.
Jake Wise with Capital Federal Savings.
Christy Marco, Independent Connection.
David Powell, Independent Connection.
Ethan
Have all of the
Brown.
members of the, I'm sorry, Nathan, Ethan, I'm sorry.
Ethan Brown, youth currently on this board.
Stepped on you, I apologize.
You're good.
Have all of the members had a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting?
Yes.
I would like to make one change to the minutes. It is on the last page, which indicates that I had mentioned perhaps an ongoing problem with a parking space at Walmart. If I said Walmart, I misspoke. It should have been Arby's. And I have done a drive-through. I did that before coming down today. They have changed the signage on that parking area, so that has been taken care of, but that probably needs to be changed in the last minutes. Can we get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll motion that we approve the meeting minutes with the amendment.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Lots of seconds.
Approved and second. Evelyn Nelson has a supervisor's report for us today.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to inform you all of, as the new ADA coordinator, I've done one kind of informative project. We had Parks and Rec reach out to us about they're building a second dock at Lakewood Park, and they wanted to make sure that the path was accessible. And so I worked with Sean Pilcher of Building Services to determine the accessibility needs. And we were able to provide them with the information that they needed. So now they're working with the engineering department actually to build that path. So, and the dock and the path. So that went very well. That was the only kind of ADA coordination type of issue that I had since the last meeting. I will say that we are changing up our, I guess, facilitation of the meeting a little bit, and Hilda is going to be facilitating the meeting. She'll be kind of my board proxy, board management proxy for AAB. So I just wanted to let you guys know you'll be, getting emails and stuff from her, so you're just not like, what's going on? So that's pretty much it. Just basic. We will, next meeting, the supervisor's report will be under, section 5, so, it'll be section 4, unfinished business. So just so you know, and if I don't have a report, it won't be on there, but if I have something, it'll be under unfinished or other business. That's all.
All right, does anyone have any questions for Evelyn? All right, we'll move on to new business. Our first thing on the agenda was Lakewood Discovery Center presentation by Brian Underwood, but Brian is a little short-handed, so he will not be able to make it today. Hopefully we can get him scheduled at a later date for that. So we'll move on to the next item under new business, which is Gretchen Boehm, did I pronounce that right? On the walkability, accessibility audits. Gretchen is with the Salina Arts Center. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks again. My name is Gretchen Boehm. I'm here today to talk a little bit about my experience with the America Walks Walking College and the plan that I had to develop with that. I had met with Evelyn and Gilda, and we talked about some of the ideas that came out of this plan, and we thought this might be a good venue to kind of talk about some of these ideas. A little bit about myself. Been living in Salina for about 2 years. I've been working at the Salina Art Center. I'm the Director of Education and Programming. Before moving here, I've lived in some larger cities without having to use vehicles. I didn't own a car for probably about the majority of my 20s. Just getting around via public transportation and walking and bicycle and stuff like that. So I've always kind of been interested with this idea of having that kind of accessibility and not being dependent on vehicles. So after moving here, I moved here from a very rural area, and I was kind of looking forward to living in a city again and having that kind of accessibility. But just some of my experiences, like living in Salina and walking in Salina, I kind of found that accessibility doesn't really exist in the way that it does in some of the larger cities. So I was interested in finding ways that we could improve walkability, accessibility, and some of these multimodal connections within the community. And then the opportunity came up to participate in the America Walks Walking College, and I think I had sent the website to Gilda. If you want to bring it up on the board, I can tell you a little bit more about what that experience was like.
Gretchen, I was going to say I was trying to avoid distractions.
Okay.
I can't access the internet unless I can log in with something quickly. So I was trying to avoid all of that going on while you were speaking, but
okay.
I can certainly log in while you continue to talk.
Okay. So America Walks each year finds, I think, between 20 to 30 fellows to participate in their walking college. And their idea is to train people to be advocates for better walking and accessibility within their community. We went through several modules. So that's their basic homepage for their walking college. They take applications for new people each year. They just finished selecting the new fellows. So if you scroll down a little bit, you can kind of see like what are the learning objectives. They want to train people to be able to work within their local governments, kind of training them on how policy works and how it's developed and stuff like that, which is something that I had never done before, which is a really great learning experience for myself. And if you scroll down a little bit more, they kind of talk about some of the skills that they would like to train people with. In that one image, which is kind of hard to see, I'm actually in that one. This is walking audits that we did in the city of New Orleans. We were there for a conference. So these are just some of the things that they're trying to train people to do. We can scroll down a little bit more. We are assigned groups, so I worked in a group with people who lived in communities that are about the same size as Salina. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that within those groups, we kind of found that there was a lot of the similar issues happening in communities about the same size. Each group was assigned a mentor, so we worked with different people who have done a lot of advocacy and work within their own communities, talking about their experience. So you can scroll down a little bit more. We can see the curriculum and the different modules. Basically, kind of like I mentioned before, they want to train advocates. They want to train people to be better community organizers. They covered a lot of topics. They covered ADA issues. They covered issues of race and discrimination within communities and how that affects accessibility. And then again, how public policy kind of shapes the way that we live and work. We can see like a little bit more kind of what they do. Talked a lot about complete streets, Vision Zero, which is the idea that they want to try to end pedestrian traffic deaths, building policy that works around that goal. So all in all, I thought it was a really exciting program to participate in. I learned a lot. I got to connect with a lot of different people. As I mentioned before, as a capstone to that, we attended the Walk Bike Places conference in New Orleans, where we could participate in more of these kind of training exercises. And during that time, I got to participate in a walking audit and then lead a walking audit as a trainee, so I could learn a little bit about how those work. So out of that, we are assigned. Our assignment within the Walking College Fellowship is to develop an action plan for our own community. So one of the things that I had wanted to do was do some walking audits within this community to kind of see where where accessibility is lacking and find ways that we can make improvements to, make our community more accessible for everyone. I specifically was looking at like downtown and neighboring communities. With the downtown redevelopment, they are doing the complete streets. So there are like the bump outs, the zero grade curves into the intersections and all that stuff, which is great. But I was thinking of like people who maybe live adjacent to downtown and issues that they might have kind of getting back and forth between, where they live and in downtown. I try to walk to work as much as I can, and I've found that it's been difficult sometimes. And some of the things that I find, which I've kind of listed as goals within my plan, that are lacking are safe crossing areas, intersections that are not protected, lack of crosswalks, improved sidewalk conditions. There's a lot of areas where sidewalks are non-existent or falling apart and really difficult to navigate. And then reduced speed limits in pedestrian or residential neighborhoods were some of the issues that I have found through my own experience. But what I wanted to do specifically, and why I'm here talking to you, is to find some groups that would be willing to participate in walking audits, to pick a neighborhood, to find some place where we can kind of just find a trail and see how it feels to kind of move from one place to another, and what kind of things we can find to change that experience. My goal in my walking audit plan specifically is to perform 2 or 3 walking audits with different community partners and neighborhoods adjacent to downtown. With doing that, how the walking audit works is you pick a point A, you go to point B. Along the way, you might stop and kind of just talk about like, oh, is this an issue? What makes you feel more comfortable to walk through here? What makes you feel less comfortable? Is it really impassable? Like, what is in the way? And then when you get to the end of it, you kind of just debrief with each other as a group to talk about the experience. And again, either bring up things that might make it easier and more accessible, or, and then also kind of talk about like things that, were issues along the way. So yeah, I'm here to kind of ask for some support and see if we can find some volunteers to help, see if we can do some of these projects within the community. If you have questions, please.
Is this primarily a daytime walking tour, or are we talking about evenings or?
It can really be flexible. And I think there are benefits to doing these at different times of the day. Again, I mean, when you bring up evening walking, there's areas where maybe the lighting is not conducive to people being there at night, and it'd be something that would be great to kind of gather that information and bring back. So I think it could be really any time.
Anyone else on the board have a question for Gretchen? How many people are you looking for, and do you have particular areas picked out at this point?
I don't have any specific areas. Again, I'm kind of focusing on neighborhoods adjacent to downtown with the idea that maybe there's some possibilities that we could expand the Complete Streets idea, through other neighborhoods and kind of connect these adjacent neighborhoods to downtown. And what was the first part of that question again? I'm sorry.
I lost
how
it.
many people?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, how many people?
The ones that we did in New Orleans, we had a group of about 28. We split into two. So we had about 16 people in each group. I don't think it necessarily needs to be that many. I would say probably about, 8 to 12 would be a good number. While we were in New Orleans as well, I mean, we had different, the people in our group varied quite a bit, younger people, older people. We did have two people in wheelchairs there to represent. People, I think they travel to a lot of conference and talk about ADA issues within, and pedestrian issues. So they were part of our group. So we wanted to kind of get a good sampling of, how different people might navigate an area and what kind of feedback they might have.
So you'd like to have somebody, at least one or two people that has a mobility issue.
Right. I mean, I think that is important, and I also think it's helpful when we're looking at accessibility because if it is accessible to someone who has a mobility issue, it's accessible to everybody, so.
Okay.
How often do you meet, or will you meet?
I'm looking to do 2 to 3 audits, so that's kind of where I'm starting at. I think ideally in my long-term goal, it'd be great if we could have more of a pedestrian group that kind of meets regularly to kind of talk about some of these issues within the community. I kind of look at that as a long-term goal. So right now I'm looking at groups that are already existing that I might be able to partner with or reach out to who have, maybe similar goals.
When you say 2 to 3 audits, is that for the year or for a month or?
That would be for the year. So in my initial plan, I was kind of looking at doing 2 to 3 audits, probably over the summer now, and then kind of looking at that information in the fall and kind of putting it into a more formal report.
You're not looking for people that would live in the primary area around the downtown area. You're just looking for individuals?
One of the groups that I wanted to reach out to, and I haven't done it yet, was the North Salina group, because I think there would be another group with a vested interest in looking at mobility and accessibility issues within their community, and also the connections to downtown. But I wanted to look at a variety of again, shareholders or people who have a vested interest in these kind of issues.
Do you have a date for your first audit?
I don't.
Pardon?
I'm looking for a group,
Okay.
and then I can look at some dates.
Is this the first group you've talked to?
Outside of, I have talked with Gilda and Evelyn and some other people with the city, and I know I've visited with Claire and some other community groups, but this is the first time I've, approached a group specifically looking for those bodies, those people to help.
Have you used any other facilities to reach out with, like newspaper or anything like that?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
I have a suggestion for you afterwards of someone that you might contact for, that would be willing to join your group.
Any other questions for Gretchen?
How long will these audits take? Does that just depend on the size of the neighborhood?
Yeah, it kind of depends on how you set it up. The one that we did in New Orleans took probably about an hour. And it was, by the end of it, I think we were all getting a little tired. I mean, but it was designed to kind of be a difficult walk so we could kind of get that experience and understand how it works. So again, it's something that would kind of depend on the group, and probably looking strategically at routes that are maybe kind of connected to downtown. I think even looking at some of the issues with parking right now, and how do you navigate from a parking lot off of like 7th or a parking lot off of 4th or 5th, and how do you navigate that to downtown could be, I think itself a walking audit, because I think there's some navigational issues and accessibility issues in there as well, so.
I would be interested in helping you.
Thank you.
I
I
will
would
say,
too. I'd be interested as well.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions for Gretchen?
I was just going to say, when I heard about the walking audits and what you were doing, that I just thought it was like a perfect fit between this board and what she's trying to do. So we kind of pushed her to come here.
There are lots of places in town
Thank you.
that kind of close. I'm kind of right off of Crawford on Highland, so it's an older neighborhood. And there are times it gets pretty scary there. It's better right now, but some of those areas where they've got the ramps, they did that, city did that, but then the sidewalks get pretty scary.
Right, yeah, and I think where I have been around town, I kind of think that's an issue all over, and it is hard if you,
I tend to walk in the street in my neighborhood rather than the sidewalk.
right, and I have to do that when I walk. I see other people doing it. Just a couple of statistics, 2018 was one that had the highest number of pedestrian deaths since 1990. They've been on the rise for the last decade. So it kind of looks like they're kind of just going to keep going in that direction. But when people don't feel comfortable, there's so many benefits to having walkable, accessible communities, but if people don't feel comfortable doing it, they're not going to do it. So what are the ways that we can kind of change the way the cities are built to make it more comfortable and accessible for people? So.
When should we contact you? We obviously have got a couple of people on the board that are willing to do this. Do we just give you our emails and you let us know when you've got this set up, or?
Yeah, we can connect afterwards, and I can get you my my information, and we can start working on when we think we might want to set a date and go from there.
Okay. Any other questions for Gretchen? Gretchen, you have any other comments?
No, just thank you for letting me come and talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is our community partnership discussion. This is something that we talked about at the last meeting, maybe even the meeting before that. This is where we talked about getting educational information out to the business community. This is also where we talked about setting up some type of an alert system for first responders to know that a person with a disability was in a residence strictly on a volunteer basis. These are the type of things that we've talked about with the community partnership. One of the things that I think we probably ought to discuss at this point is the fact that we only have 2 meetings left for this year. And with that being said, in order to start working towards some of these things that we identified as plans for the coming year, we might want to consider forming a subcommittee that can work on these things between meetings. Because with only 2 meetings left, I don't think we're going to make a whole lot of progress on these things. Of course, it's not that we have to accomplish all of these by the end of the year, but we need to get them started. So I would open the discussion for your thoughts on forming a subcommittee within our board to take on dealing with the partnership aspect of the ADA plan that we laid out.
Mr. Chair, can I interject for a moment? May I interject
Sure.
for a moment? I did just want to just take us back a couple steps just to kind of like open that up and make sure that, well, just following here with our agenda, there are just some points that as staff, we just kind of identified. So I did open up, if you'll notice, our work plan for the year. So I just wanted to kind of make sure we led with that. And just kind of go back to it, not necessarily review it in full now, but I did want to just refer to it as we go today. We did come together back in February for a special meeting to create and adopt this work plan. So it's really what's going to determine our direction for the year, and some of the items may turn into some possible longer term projects or areas of focus that would go beyond 2019, but nonetheless, this is kind of our guide for the year as we go. And so with that being said, as we identify the different agenda items for our meetings, I know our chair touched on we only have a couple of meetings left for the year that are regularly scheduled. Again, for those agenda items, the work plan is kind of providing that structure and guide. Of course, we'll have special items that come up throughout the year. Different board members will bring to the attention of the chair. So as we were going through the work plan for the creation of today's agenda, this is our first board meeting since the adoption of the work plan. And we had identified that one of the objectives that you all had identified, part of your goals going forward as a board, many of those objectives include the partnering with other organizations or city departments, as our chair had stated. So we really wanted to take a minute and discuss what that would look like. For example, like when it comes time to decide on different specific projects, different like grant writing or things that have been brought up by different board members, as we look at, as we get different presenters, different requests from community. We just want to discuss really what that partnership, what that collaboration really looks like to you all as a board. So we wanted to make a little bit of time for you all to discuss now. And we can start some of that discussion now and go on as our chair had directed.
Any comments on the idea of forming a subcommittee or subcommittees?
Well, that's what I was thinking, forming subcommittees that are responsible for maybe each one of our goals, specifically going through each one. The first one, you're talking about, the education materials when relating to parking situations. I know you had a big influence on that, so my first thought is that'd be something that you'd want to head up.
As I recall, you're the guy that nominated me for this job.
Yeah, I nominated you for the job, that's right. So, that was my first thought, was each of these where we had a different idea in place, then come up with a subcommittee, and then at each of these board meetings, then we can come through and give an update as to where we stand within each of these subcommittees, within these goals. It sounded like a good plan to me. I don't know what your guys' thoughts were.
As staff, so for example, we've got different subcommittees with our other commission, and just as an example for you all, typically we're looking at maybe 2 or 3 of those individuals that would be a smaller representation of the board as a whole, like you're saying, to identify the different objectives, and just creating the different subcommittees just allows for more of that time that we don't necessarily have within our normally scheduled year. And these are in your binders as well, the work plan is, and this kind of just visual I created with just what is left on our regular schedule for the year. So then within that, like I'm hearing, Jake say about the different subcommittees that could be formed to address the different goals, within this regular schedule is where a subcommittee would maybe meet in an additional time. That would be all up to you, you as a board to decide.
Well, we could always meet outside of those regular dates
Correct.
and work on the projects. And then my
Yes.
thought would be is if we form the subcommittees, then we can give updates at our regular scheduled meetings.
Correct.
During that time. Get more achieved, I guess.
It'll give us an opportunity to get a little more traction out of the things we've identified, make a little more progress on them, perhaps a little faster. Expanding upon your idea of a subcommittee for each of the items that we've identified, what would that make it? About 4 subcommittees?
We do have 4 goals on the work plan. And again, this is all really up to you. That's the agenda. Excuse me. Really, it depends on how you want to, go about designing your plan for these objectives that you all did identify. We want to make sure as staff that you are having the time and the people available to help you accomplish as much of your work plan as possible, knowing again that some of our projects may carry on. However, there's no anything set in stone saying how many subcommittees there need to be, what that needs to look like. It could be a general subcommittee with possibly a rotating focus throughout the year. That would all be up to you, up for discussion. The only thing is today, if we do choose to create a subcommittee, we would need to vote on that today, and whatever you all decide that it is that you are wanting to do.
All right, thoughts on the subcommittee?
I believe that we should identify like 2 of the goals or the most important. Is that way, I know I'm not really a member because identifying that we have 7 people here today, like if we tried to split it into 4 of them, that would be like 2 per subcommittee. So identifying 1 would be most beneficial, in my opinion.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like if we divide up into each group, you're going to be spreading too many people too thin, and we won't really accomplish anything. If we want to accomplish things, I think it would be beneficial to have, at least 4 people working on 2 goals rather than, only 2.
Yeah, my thoughts were more along that line, like one subcommittee, like a special project subcommittee, so you could work on, the work plan goals, but then if something else comes up, which would hopefully kind of fit into the goals, but, just kind of leaving it open and kind of more broad, that might work a little better, I think.
So if I understand you, you're thinking of one subcommittee being a special projects subcommittee that would work on these items that we've identified in a rotating basis.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I think you're right about spreading too thin. I don't want you guys to be spread too thin. We're going from, every 3 months to, I would think at least every month. So, thinking about some of our, our HRC, they meet every month and their subcommittees meet every 2 weeks. So, it just really depends on what you want. But I would think to really accomplish, these goals, like every month would be, would work probably really well. And, just in my opinion on the subcommittee, I think it's a really good idea. This board, is so important, and I feel like every 3 months it's so much that could be accomplished by this board. I don't know if every 3 months is gonna be able to because you guys have some really amazing goals, and I just don't know if it's going to work in, meeting every 3 months.
Thoughts or comments?
I agree with what she's saying. I mean, I agree with
Ethan?
Ethan.
The one I
We
keep
know each
calling
other, and I
Nathan?
can't
Yeah.
remember your name.
Yeah, that's another question for discussion. Should we meet sooner, more frequently? I don't know if that's in our control, but if it's something we want to do.
I would
Well,
think that with the special project subcommittee, we could meet it, and we could set our own timetable for meetings,
Yeah.
so.
And I don't know, for the overall committee, I mean, I'm used to being like on the Human Relations Commission and where we met monthly and got a lot of stuff done. So this is the first time I've been on a 3-month committee, and it's really you kind of start over every time. So to me, it's not a very productive schedule.
Yeah, I agree. To change meetings, like you said, that would have to like be a change in code and everything, which is something you guys could, if you are interested, we can, find out how to do it. But a subcommittee would be an immediate way to be able to do that without changing the code and all that stuff.
At this point, do we have a motion for forming a subcommittee? Special Projects Subcommittee.
I move we form a special projects subcommittee.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Now that we have established a Special Projects Subcommittee, we have to determine how many members want to volunteer to be on it. I will go first. I will volunteer for it.
And if I can add something quickly, Mr. Chair, we can also, the volunteers can come forth today, and then from that point, we could communicate as staff and decide upon like the meeting schedule for that subcommittee. So that portion does not necessarily need to be decided today. But, what you're suggesting about the volunteers to be on that subcommittee, that would be a good first step for today.
Can I attend those as well? Yeah, okay.
So you're saying we need to assign who's going to be on this subcommittee today? It's not something that they can just join at any point in time?
I guess that would be all. I'm going by example just of what we've done, kind of in the past. We did just have, if we decide, okay, we want 3 people, who's interested now, or, put a timeline on, week's end or whatnot. What does that look like? If our regular meetings are spread out so far, then perhaps the most efficient way would be to decide today. That way staff knows, who to communicate with to kind of establish that meeting schedule and that, like sub work plan almost. So
So would this subcommittee be meeting like once a month?
I think that'd probably be the best idea.
I'll volunteer.
Thank you. I think once we have our meetings, and if we determine that we need to meet more often than once a month, we can decide that. What are you doing this? Shh.
Jan, did I see you raise your hand?
No, you didn't. As a matter of fact, I thought it was good.
Put your hands up.
Most of the time I could volunteer. Right now is a crazy time for me with some issues outside of Salina, so
No, I understand.
I don't know. There would be times when I might not be available, but anytime I'm around, I certainly would be. Okay. By the way, I'm not going to chair it, but so I have something for you. This is the lady at Astra. I told you they have, I think it's the 3rd Thursday night that they allow people to have community meetings there.
Okay.
Free, and I think she kind of helps get it going, so it's Tammy at Astra.
All right, thank you. All right, with the fact that we have established the Special Projects Subcommittee, we do have members, so now we need to determine when we want to schedule our first meeting. You've seen that May, August, and November basically are pretty much open, but I think the sooner that we can get this scheduled, probably the better off we are to get the momentum started. I would like to see us do it, obviously, sometime this month. Leaving it open to the people that have already volunteered. Is there a particular time this month that works for you?
I know I would like to get back on that so I can check my calendar at work.
Okay.
To see what's going on at work this month.
All right.
And be able to get that situated and then get back within sometime next week.
Okay. Would that be all right, Gilda?
Yep, and so what we can do is, kind of reach out, start that conversation between the board members and the youth on board member who have volunteered to be on the subcommittee and discuss scheduling. That will be fine.
Why don't I do this? Why don't I send out an email to all of the members of the board and set May 10th as a deadline for volunteering for the committee. And at that particular time, we can establish a date in May to get together. Also, at that time, if we decide that we need to meet more often, or if we think we do. Now, would we be fluid enough with this subcommittee that if we have a project that needs more attention, maybe twice a month, would we have facilities available for that?
We do have the facilities available. Again, that would, scheduling will be certainly up to you. If that is what you all decide that you are needing, then, we would be charged to create that as best as we can and just kind of go from there. If after that first meeting, you say, hey, we don't want to wait another month before we meet. Let's meet again in, 2 or 3 weeks. That's a possibility.
Okay, all right.
Is our communication within the subcommittee also part of the open records? Meaning that if we're communicating between each other within the subcommittees, it's one of those things that we got to be careful about?
So for our subcommittees, they don't have to be recorded, but you will report back at the regular meeting. So it'll be just like a basic report.
So, but if we're exchanging information between emails, then that's one of those things that we just got to be cautious about.
Yeah, so just basically not having like a serial meeting during an email. And Hill is going to talk about training. We're going to do some parliamentary procedure and some open records and Open Meetings Act training. So we'll get more into the specifics about that. But basically, if whatever happens to the subcommittee, the subcommittee would come and report it at the board meeting rather than sending out emails. That would be the goal.
Okay.
Would we have to have a quorum for the subcommittee?
No.
Okay.
No, the subcommittee is a little different, so it's a little easier to navigate. And then, like I said, as long as we have kind of a summary for the board at the meeting, we'll be good. I did want to mention, too, real quick while I was thinking about it, as far as the subcommittee, I was thinking that would possibly be a good opportunity to work more with Gretchen on that project too. So that's what I was going to say about that. So.
Okay.
And I do believe we already did. We did have the vote to establish the subcommittee. So at that point, we're good to go on that, I believe, Mr. Chair, unless you have something else to add at the moment.
Okay, so I will send the email out to the members volunteering for the Special Projects Subcommittee. Deadline will be May 10th. At that time, we will set the date for our Special Projects Subcommittee meeting. This would be a place where we could talk about grants, the special projects that we've already identified, and anything else that might come up. We'll also determine at our first meeting whether we need to meet more than once a month. Are there any questions or comments about that? No. All right, do we need a motion on this, or? No? Okay. Okay, moving on to item number 5 on the agenda, which is board training. And by way of explanation, and Gilda related to this just a moment ago, this will
Yes.
be kind of an overview of what the Accessibility Advisory Board is and how we are supposed to operate. It'll be an opportunity for new member or members to be brought up to speed on the purpose of this board. We have a number of dates available for us. This will be a special, I guess you would call it a special meeting of the board. We have, 3 dates that we can choose from?
We do, and I do have a little bit more background, again, kind of relating to the work plan on that. Since the goals and objectives, again, have been identified, I already mentioned it is up to us as staff just to make sure that we're providing you the best resources as far as people and time as you move through it. But so the first, within that, different ideas and needs for training might come up as we look through the work plan and our different goals. So the first training topic that we've really identified is, like you were saying, Bill, Mr. Chairman here, is that it'll be like a really all-encompassing training, an overview of what our office, what our division does. I did, if you'll give me just one moment, I have a, it is in your binders, this handout is, it's called the Training Schedule Notes. Again, just to kind of create that visual to go with it, but as we, again, think about the needs for training, we discussed, again, in conjunction with the work plan and these trainings, when would they happen? Like you've mentioned, outside of the normally scheduled AAB meetings. And then as far as content, what I was summarizing is that, it will really tie in that overview about what our office does, the different areas of focus we have, and how they tie in with ADA and accessibility issues and concerns. So I just visually put that up there as kind of ADA 101, knowing that you all have some of the, this background knowledge, expertise in your professional lives and personal lives, but really just tying that into the mission of our office, of our division, what we do, just to, for all that cohesiveness. It would also include like a general parliamentary procedural training. And so what we need to do today is discuss and select, like you were saying, a special meeting date for that training to happen.
What are the available dates?
So our target date as staff that we had just kind of identified in the calendar, we had looked at towards the end of May. So May 30th, it is really up to you all as a board. Again, in looking at our calendar for the year and knowing we do kind of have that open schedule as far as what's expected of us as a board already with our regularly scheduled meetings. So we have a little bit of freedom to kind of squeeze this training in, fairly soon. But it is up, for discussion with you all as a board.
Well, as a board member, I'm just going to say that I'm not available on May 30th, nor will anybody that works with me be available on May 30th.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Are there any other conflicts?
Now, that takes care of several of, that's a good majority of the committee. I'm thinking we need to do find another time.
Okay. Do we have any other dates available on your schedule?
Really, if you have an idea of when, then we would, look more specifically.
Okay.
That was just kind of like a target date, we were just looking, again, just generally.
Okay.
So it would have to include, the entire board. So we definitely want to take that into account. And I know we haven't scheduled too many special meetings in the past, or at least recent history for the AAB. So really, again, it's just up for your discretion as chair and, the need of the board members.
I'm available about any time the week before, that 20th to 24th of May.
Is it possible for you to send out like 3 or 4 dates in an email and then us respond with the best date. I mean, without having my laptop in front of me and my calendar open, it's hard for me to say yes or no right now.
Absolutely. We can definitely do that. I will also say we had discussed the 16th of May, the 30th of May, and June 6th as potential thoughts. Again, I know that not every, you don't have your calendar in front of you. So if what we want to do is send out those potential dates or like a doodle poll or something, and that way we can select what works best for the majority.
I'm a fan of the doodle polls.
Okay, great.
Any other comments on the training session? All right, we'll get that, you get that email out in the next
Yes.
couple of days? Mm-hmm. All right.
We can do that. And then did you want to establish a deadline for that or just email reminders if we haven't heard responses from everyone?
Let's go ahead and make a deadline of May the 8th on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Reminder to everyone that our next scheduled meeting for the entire Accessibility Advisory Board is coming up on 8/1 of 2019, so please put that on your calendar. Are there any comments or suggestions at this particular point? And I get a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Meeting is adjourned.
Hey, when did we get